Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being on the call today. We have a fantastic presentation for you today. Just want to start introduce myself. This is Jeff Burke, the SVP of Sales Operations for EPSG. And I know you guys are probably used to hearing myself, Michelle previously, a lot of internal employees kind of doing these presentations, but we have a great treat today. We actually have one of our top sales partners, Brad Summer, that's actually going to do a great presentation on adding margins to each and every deal. Just to give you a little background on Brad, he's been with us for about a year plus now, but he comes from the industry. And, you know, just in this 1 year, you take a look at his portfolio and you see the actual profitability in that. It is among the highest of anybody we have in our organization. So I think he's the perfect person to kind of, you know, share some of that knowledge on how he's able to build that margin into that. So with that being said, guys, I won't take any more of his time. Please, Brad, feel free. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. So Jeff, Brett, and I were together a couple months ago, and we were talking about the makeup of the sales force, and we all were in agreement that the sales force is excellent at opening accounts. It's the lifeline of the business, and everyone's focused and great at it. They're also pretty good at servicing their accounts for retention and for referrals, but that takes up most of their day and their weeks and their months and their year. What they're not so great at or don't have the time to focus on is making sure the accounts are as profitable as possible for themselves, and that's margin. And today's presentation is going to be about how we can help you use the tools to make sure your accounts are as profitable as possible, as well as being as competitive and in the best interest of your merchants. So the goal of every EPSG sales partner is to build wealth and financial independence and flexibility. I think that goes without saying. How do they do that? Again, they do that mostly by opening new accounts, by retaining and servicing accounts, and by getting referrals. Today, we're going to speak about margin and the benefits of margin. Increasing the margin of an account is the fastest and most time-effective way I know to grow your book and revenue. Why? Because you're not adding any more time or effort to what you're already doing. All it's doing is making your accounts more efficient and more profitable. And the example, again, is you open an account. If you were able to double the margin, it's the equivalent of opening 2 accounts. What does increased margin do? It increases your residuals, as we said. It increases your flexibility and competitiveness in being able to land new accounts and new converting prospects to merchants. And again, the more accounts you have, the happier your merchants are, the more referrals you're going to get. So what is margin? Most of you may know this, but again, we want to walk you through it from the beginning. The definition of margin is the monthly earnings of the account divided by the monthly volume of the account. So if an account is $300 of profit, you divide it by the $100,000 of monthly volume, you're going to get 0.3% margin. In math, it's going to come out as 0.003, which becomes 0.3% of margin for the account. And the big note here for you guys that aren't as focused on math, when it comes out 0.003, you got to move the decimal point 2 times to the right, and it becomes 0.3%. Some salespeople and some of your support may hear 30 basis points. That's the same thing as 0.3%. There are many factors that generate the revenue of the account, but there's 2 primary factors. The number one is the discount rate, and the second one will be the transaction rate. So those are 2 things you put on your application. So how do we figure out the discount rate? It's just the percentage rate you charge on the total volume. Okay? In general, most people charge the same amount on American Express as they do on bank card, but if you do charge a different amount, you have to calculate those 2 numbers differently. So let's go to a real-life example. Account's doing $200,000 of Visa MasterCard Discover for the month. You choose to decide to charge them 0.4% discount rate. Remember, to calculate it, you got to move the 0.40 over 2 times to make it 0.004. The 200,000 times the 0.004 becomes $800 of profit. You're also going to have $50,000 of Amex or OptBlue in this case. It was a more competitive situation, so we only could charge 0.25% for the Amex part to win the business. Same thing, you do the 50,000, you move the decimal point 2 times to make it 0.0025. You multiply it by the 50,000, you get another $125 of revenue. You add that together, you get $925 of revenue. You divide it by the total volume. you get 0.0037 or 0.37%. And that's your primary core margin on an account. I know I probably went a little fast. Again, type some questions if you have any, but here's a great example. This account's the margin's 0.37% off the two primary factors. I'm sorry, just of discount rate at this point. Okay? The second factor that drives margin is transaction rate. That's how many cents you charge per transaction. And I know everyone knows that. The part today that we're going to introduce that a lot of people don't apply is we want to turn that into a percentage so you can then compare it and contrast it with the discount rate. So let's go through one more example. Account's doing $40,000 of volume. You choose to charge 8 cents per transaction, or that's what you need to charge to win the account. There's 300 transactions. So you have $40,000 of volume. You divide it by the 300 transactions to get the average ticket, which becomes the next important definition you need to factor in here, and that comes out as $133. How do you figure out the revenue? You times the 0.08 cents times the 300 transactions. You have another $24 of revenue. I think everyone knows how to do that. Let's go through the percentage now. How do you figure out the transaction rate as a percentage margin? You take the $24 of revenue, you divide it by the total volume for the month, and you're going to get, in this case, 0.0006. You move the decimal point 2 points over, and you get 0.06%. That's what the margin is. There's actually an easier way to figure out the percent, which I want you to really use, but I wanted to show you both ways. You just take the 8 cents transaction rate, you divide it by the average ticket, you're going to get that same 0.06%. It's just a quicker way, I think, in the application in the field to figure it out. But those are both, you're going to come to the same number either way. Those are the two primary factors, and we're going to apply it in a minute. Before we get to that, to figure out margin in any way, you have to always look at your Schedule A because you have to factor that in to get the real margin of profit on the account. We're going to make some assumptions for today. We're going to use a 6-cent transaction rate cost on your Schedule A, and we're going to do 0 discount rate. So we're going to factor that into all the examples. Let's go through another example. $100,000 of volume, doing 500 transactions for the month. You're charging 0.5% or 0.5, and you're charging 10 cents a transaction. How do you figure out the average ticket? You do the $100,000 of volume, you divide it by the 500 transactions, you get a $200 average ticket. So let's apply everything we just learned now. What do we do first? We divide the 4 cents, and how do we get the 4 cents? We take the 10-cent transaction rate you're charging, you minus your 6-cent Schedule A, you get 4 cents. If you divide it by the average ticket of $200, you're going to end up at 0.02%. So that's the percentage rate converted from the discount, from the transaction rate. Total margin, you're charging 0.5%, 0.5%, you add the 0.02%, and it's at 0.52%. So that's really the simplest way to figure it out. Now you know on your account the margin is 0.52%. You also learned that because the average ticket was relatively high at $200, the 4 cents of net or 10 cents of that you're charging the merchant really didn't add that much margin, only added 0.02%. What was most important in this example was the 0.5% discount rate you charge, and this is going to become very important later in the presentation. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. And I just brought out, let's give another example. Now we're going to do one with a much lower ticket, average ticket rate. 100,000 volume, now we're doing 5,000 transactions, so the average ticket's only 20. So if we go to the calculations, and I'm going to assume now that you've applied what we've talked about, the conversion of the transaction rate to a percentage becomes 0.2% instead of 0.02%, which is much more powerful. Now the transaction rate's much more important in your overall determining what's important to charge the merchant and in your profitability. So in this case, all of a sudden, you're making 0.7% margin, even though you're charging the merchant the same amount because the average ticket's much lower because they're doing so many more tickets. And this is very important when you're looking at a statement and you're trying to get a merchant to determine what's most important between the discount rate and the transaction rate. So in this case, the 10 cents added a lot of profit to the account, where in the other case, you could have probably lowered your transaction rate if it helped you win the business because it wouldn't have affected the margin by very much. So the next slide really just talks about what we just already discussed, which is on very high average tickets, the discount rate is not, the transaction rate is not that important. And when you get lower average tickets, the transaction rate becomes very important to your profitability. So let's illustrate one more real life example that we went through recently. $20,000 of volume, 500 transactions. The average ticket is $40. In one case, we offer to charge 15-cent transaction with no discount rate. In the other example, it's a 10-cent transaction rate and 8 cents discount rate. In a lot of cases, a lot of salespeople I talk to, they would think the second scenario is more profitable because you're charging two different charges to the merchant. But if we go through the math, in scenario one, you end up with a 0.225% margin only where you're charging a transaction rate. And in this example, it ends up being 9 cents because we charge 15 cents minus the 6 cent Schedule A divided by the average ticket, and you get 0.225%. In the other example where we're charging 10 cents and 0.08% discount rate, we end up with only a 0.18%. And again, we can go through the math again, but the bottom line is, in this case, off of the average ticket, it was better just to charge the 15-cent transaction rate and no discount rate. And it's a very good example when you're going through different merchants that you can go back and forth with the transaction rate and the discount rate to determine what's the best way to do it. One other example Jeff and I just worked on, which was a big chain, they were getting charged 20 cents and 0.05% discount rate. But the average ticket was only $20. We waived the discount rate completely. And the merchant was so happy about that, even though he didn't really realize that the cents per share was the most important part of the margin and the most important part of his cost. And it allowed us to win the business by only lowering the transaction rate by 5 cents because we lowered the margin completely, but we really didn't give up that much profitability in doing it. So let's just summarize what we went through so far. There's the discount rate and the transaction rate. And those are the two main ways that you generate revenue and profit for an account. But there's a lot of secondary factors that generate margin. And the next page kind of goes through most of the ones that can help you, again, in creating profitability. There's the bank service fee. There's the monthly minimum. There's the chargeback and retrieval fees. There's the annual fee. There's the batch fee. There's the gateway fee. There's AVS surcharge. A lot of salespeople out there look at these things and some don't. These all impact your profitability. And once again, you got to go back to your Schedule A cost to determine how you're going to implement this when you do an application. So for today's presentation, we're going to assume a $7.50 Schedule A cost. We're going to assume 0 monthly minimum. We're going to assume a $15 chargeback and retrieval cost. We're going to assume a 0 annual fee cost. We're going to assume a 15-cent batch fee cost, $5 gateway fee cost, and 5-cent AVS surcharge. If you go to the first example we give, we're using $20,000 monthly volume, 500 transactions. We're going to charge $10 bank fee. We're going to charge 20-cent batch fee. We're going to charge $30 chargeback fee. We're going to charge a $10 gateway fee. Now let's figure out how much extra profitability you just generated for this account. The net number after you factor in your Schedule A costs would be $2.50 of bank fee, $1 of batch fee, $15 chargeback fee, and $5 gateway fee. That's $23.50 of revenue you just generated in these ancillary secondary revenue sources. If you divide that by the $20,000 of total volume, you're going to end up with 0.1175 of extra margin that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Just as importantly, that $23.50 of profit is pure profit that you know you're going to get on that account. And again, a lot of people are not taking advantage of this. In this example, that I give, if someone has a 200 account portfolio and you're doing this on every account of $23.50 of net profit on these secondary factors, that's going to add $4,700 of monthly income to you. That's a lot of money, at least in my book. The second example, and something I never took advantage of that I'm starting to, is the annual fee. And if you're able to charge the $99 annual fee and you have, again, a 200 account book, it's actually almost $20,000 of profit in December you're going to get every year, one-time bonus, which is very, very powerful. So just to summarize everything we went through so far, you have to remember all your Schedule A costs because they factor into the net profitability of the account. The second thing and third thing are the most powerful parts that, again, when I was early in the business, I didn't really think about. I always tried to just charge the lowest amount I could to win the account. But winning the account's important, but you also have to make sure you make as much money as you can in the account. And you have to realize that if you're charging competitive rates and you're providing first-in-class service and support that most of our sales agents do, it's fair for you to charge these things and make money for yourself. Secondly, most of you know who've been in the business a while, everything we do is transparent and everything we do is deserved, but these secondary factors, once the account's open, they're not really charges that merchants focus on going forward. So you have to take advantage of this when you first open an account so that you can get the benefit of this and make extra money for yourself. And that's what the third point is that Jeff and I talk about all the time. When you do an application, it's your one chance to charge what you think is fair. It's very, very difficult after an account is open to ask a merchant to add a charge or increase a charge because you realize that you deserve it based on what you're doing for them. But the one chance you have is when you do the application and you explain to them that you're giving them incredibly competitive rates and that these things are justified. You also can always take that time to discount those rates down, those secondary factors especially, and look like a hero to the merchant that you're actually giving them a discount and still make some profitability. So I think you should all make this part of your normal practice to decide, depending on how competitive the situation is, to add some of these fees in at full cost or at least partial because A, it's justified, B, this is the one time you have to put it in, and C, you can always discount it down and look like you're giving them a benefit. And if you do that, over time, you're going to see that all your accounts become more profitable, even though on one given account it may not seem like a lot of money. Over a whole portfolio, it becomes, like I gave in those two examples, very powerful incremental residual or one-time bonuses at the end of the year. One other area that I actually was not familiar with that EPSG provides for all of us as sales representatives of the company is the small merchant pricing structure. And I think it's actually a great thing that I've never used that I'm now going to start to use a lot. And what it does is for smaller merchants, in general, ones that are doing $10,000 or less, you're able to actually charge them a fixed amount above interchange so that for the merchant, they know exactly what you're charging them. Instead of having a lot of ancillary charges add up and become too much, you're given a fixed amount. Merchants love that so they know exactly what their cost is going to be. And for you, you know you're going to make money on the account. And on smaller accounts, they're sometimes confusing to the salesperson that you're happy you opened the account. You may have even gotten a one-time bonus for opening the account. But then you realize later that the account's actually not profitable because of all the Schedule A costs and all the other factors that are involved. And by charging a fixed cost above interchange, you're ensuring, A, a better chance to get the account, and B, you're knowing you're going to make money in the account. And again, we have a lot of accounts that lose money, which isn't good for the company, obviously, but more importantly for all of you salespeople on the call, it's not good for you either. Even though you were so excited you opened the account, you actually lose money on the account. So how does it work? It's a fixed fee. It's simplified pricing. It ensures margin for you, and it gives you a better chance to get the smaller accounts. So let's give an example. Account's doing $8,000 a month, 100 transactions. You decide, you know what, I can get this account if I just charge them $40 fixed rate above interchange with no other costs. So let's go back to the whole math now of margin. Your Schedule A cost is 6 cents. You're doing 100 transactions, so there's actually $6 of cost that you actually have to come up with to make this account profitable. There's a $7.50 statement fee on Schedule A as well, and there's a batch fee of 15 cents a transaction in these examples. So you actually you have costs on your account of the $6, it's the $7.50, and the $3. But by charging $40 and you subtract the difference, you're still coming up with the $23.50 of profit on the account. So you covered all your costs, you're making $23 on a small account, and it allowed you to market it in a better way to get this small account. Because I know from experience, smaller accounts are just as finicky, just as difficult in trying to justify why they should do business with you, but I know that they'll look very favorable upon a fixed cost, so they know exactly what their costs are. The only caveat is just realize the FANA fee is billed separately because that's a fixed cost that has to also be factored in. So tying everything together, by being more cognizant of your costs in Schedule A and all the ways that you can increase your profitability, first and foremost, you're going to increase your monthly and yearly residuals. Your accounts are all going to become more profitable. Secondly, you become more competitive. So someone came up with just actually a great question. They're asking, is the fixed rate also called the bundled rate? It's exactly the same. Jeff, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say, a fixed rate or bundled rate's a little bit different. So in the, like we're talking semantics here as well. Some people might call things differently. Traditionally, a bundled rate is inclusive of all the interchange and a percentage higher, right? So that's more something like a 3.25% bundled rate. That's the only thing the merchant would pay,
right?
Which is so they'll statement will literally say the amount of volume times 3.25%. What would the kind of pros and cons from a merchant's perspective is that the profit in that bundled rate is not disclosed. You really have no idea as a merchant how much higher above that expense that 3.25% would be in that example. Where with a fixed rate pricing, it's a little bit different, where we're passing through the interchange as is with no profit, and then we're adding just a static $40 on top of that.
So the way I'm going to say the same thing but in a different way. The fixed rate that I went through, this is the same comparison as you compare interchange versus tiered. And in most cases, I know most of us try to charge interchange plus. So interchange plus would be my example, that you're charging interchange plus a fixed amount of $40, which all the reasons that you sell interchange are the same here, plus there's a fixed amount on top of that you're saying, look, this is all I'm making, it's a fair amount, and you control your cost. The bundled is really another way to do tiered, which if you're in a tiered situation, we're not at all telling you not to do it, but it's really just another way to do tiered. And to Jeff's point, bundled, you have to factor in, you have to guess the interchange rates, build in a profit, and A, there's always some risk that you didn't give enough and the account may not become profitable, and B, if you are completely transparent with your prospect or merchant, you have to tell them that it's not as good a situation as doing the fixed example, because the fixed example is you're getting wholesale interchange rates plus this exact amount. So we're not saying one's better than the other, but if you're doing interchange plus for your book, the fixed is the comparable way. If tiered is part of what you're doing, bundled would be something that you would do, with the way I would say it.
No, I think you're spot on. And Natalie's asking a couple more questions about bundle pricing. And one thing I would add, though, Natalie, you're absolutely right. This would be a great segue into a bundled pricing. But as you probably know, that's almost a training in its own, because bundled pricing is a great pricing tool and a great way to attract small businesses, right? Or even large businesses for that matter. However, it's a little bit more complex than people kind of give it credit to. It's the factors that kind of vary what that expense is can vary a lot. You're talking the average ticket, the business type, because it all is you have to predetermine what kind of cards are going to be processed. So, so I don't want to get too deep into it because it can be a rabbit hole in a sense, but I will tell you that, we've been working on a bundled rate training that we will definitely, be able to present out there. The one tip I can give you is if you have a previous month statement or, several month statements, it's much easier because then we can actually use that a real-life example of determining what the interchange cost is going to be on a moving forward basis. You can take a shot in the dark at times, but that's exactly what it is a shot in the dark. If you have previous statements, we can do an analysis. And also, guys, just so you know, Melissa and Rich and their team are fully capable of putting together a bundled price analysis for you. So if you have an example of a statement that you want to turn in the future and you'd like to get a bundled analysis rather than a traditional cost plus analysis, just make sure you emphasize that when you submit it, and that makes things much easier. But I don't want to dance around it, guys. That it is a very powerful selling tool, and we will definitely make sure we put something together in a training environment to be able to kind of sell that on the fly.
So just to answer a few more questions and again tie together what Jeff and I just discussed, for today's presentation we didn't want to get involved with all the moving parts of interchange and how it would impact a bundled presentation. Today's presentation was really about interchange plus examples. Someone just asked, can we get both the cost plus and a fixed rate proposal? Absolutely. On the smaller examples like that, you absolutely can do that. On the bigger ones, it's not going to really be appropriate. So again, just to tie everything together, if anyone has any questions, please email me. I know we went through the math kind of quickly, and for some people that may be a little more daunting. I'm happy to walk you through it, how to get the transaction rate to a percentage and how to go figure out overall margin. What I really want everyone to take away from today is by focusing on the profitability of the account, by all the ways we talked about, you're only increasing your income without putting any more effort in. We know how hard it is to get an account and to keep working to retain accounts. So this is a way to just make more money and be more profitable, and at the same time win more accounts because you have more flexibility without putting any more effort or work in. And once you go through a few of these, and again, I'm happy to help you with them at first, it'll become very simple, very commonplace, and it'll just be part of what you do all the time. You really could also look at your accounts where you're not making money or losing money, and those would be a great place to start to look as real-life examples of how you could have done them differently or even try to do them differently, because if an account's losing money, there's really no reason to keep it. And this will all help you eventually get referrals as well, because you'll have happier customers and you'll make more money and have more time to retain and go after more customers. So thank you very much. Please email me with any questions. I know we tried to cover a lot in a short period of time. We're going to have more follow-up on this and some other related topics in the next month or two, and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.